Okay, we are live. So, for those listening at home, welcome to the Live from the Sword Coast podcast. My name is Kevin Madison, and I will be your friendly dungeon muser this evening. Tonight, I am shooting a quick video. Well, it's not going to be a quick video, it's going to be likely a fairly long one. To talk about the state of the union of the channel, provide some updates on some of the games that we have been running on the channel, and talk about some plans that I've got for the game going, or for the channel going forward. We're a little bit early for second. Actually, we're quite a bit early. We're about 6 weeks early for a second quarter video, but the next couple of weeks are going to be fairly busy. And then I've got on June 1st, which is about 2 weeks away from the time of recording, is our annual gaming marathon, where we're going to be playing about 16 hours of a surprise game. Yeah, and I figured I would give a quick update on where, in particular, because we've got two games that were ongoing games that aren't going any longer. I was going to shoot videos for each of those individually, and then just decided to kind of fold everything into this. So that's a lot of material to go through. Well, the way I'm going to organize it is I'm going to talk about the channel, or the games that are not being run on the channel any longer. That's the Iron Gods campaign, and where we were playing Pathfinder First Edition, and the Barrowmaze campaign, which was our go-to game for Wednesdays, usually on the channel. Then I'm going to talk about the things we've got planned for going forward. So that's, I guess, the way I'm going to kind of organize things. Maybe what I'll do is, if you're not interested in hearing about the reasons for the wrap up of the older games, what I'll do is I'll put a timestamp in the description of the video at the end of this, after the fact, so you can zip your way forward to get to there. So first off, so the two games, as I said, that aren't going forward any longer are the campaign that we had playing Greg Gillespie's very cool Barrowmaze Complete. Barrowmaze this is the 5th edition version, but I've got my OSR version is kind of piled away right now. So for those who are unfamiliar with it, Barrowmaze was a mega dungeon that was created by Greg Gillespie as an exercise in creating a more, I guess, more approachable and gameable kind of sandbox game where you were exploring this mega dungeon. And we ran about 35 sessions of it and had a shit ton of fun with it. Like, it was a really, really fun game. We started playing the campaign using the Pathfinder 2nd Edition playtest, which was a lot of fun. But we made a decision to change from that to using instead Kevin Crawford's Scarlet Heroes role-playing game to run that, which was kind of a more of an OSR game, but it was in a what do you call it? In a heroic kind of vein, so your characters could play, and feel like real badasses, rather than just the kind of chumps that sometimes you can kind of play in some OSR games. And we got we had a great deal of fun with that. Like, it was a lot of fun. We had about 4 or 5 players who were regularly in it, playing different characters, and I think that we just hit a point where, well, I mean, there's a combination of things. We had some of our players had changes in their availabilities, so we saw some people leave the game in early 2019. We saw people join in the game as well too, which was kind of cool. But we got to a point where I think that everyone was ready for something a little different. And we didn't actually, there was no final wrap up for the campaign. There was no point where we ended a specific story. But the way the game was that that's, I guess, part of the reason that gave us the impetus to try something different, was that there wasn't really a story. We had some plot elements that were going forward in the campaign, but the vast majority of that campaign was about picking up and going to the Barrowmaze. And it was yeah, man, it's a great product. Like, it's a really, really terrific product, in particular for the kind of pick up and play style that we had for the real old school style of, like, random encounters, making travel dangerous, and having the pre-made dungeon to go through. Like, this is such a terrific product to run, just open book and run. There's about 16 pages or so that you need to read to prep for it, to kind of like get the sense of the setting. But once you do that, you can kind of, like, you really don't need to read ahead. You can just get playing, and it's just great that way. But the thing is we got to a point where we kind of wanted to transition to something different, you know, and with losing players and whatnot, and with some new players who were interested in playing on our Wednesdays, and also with the loss of our Delta Green game, which was played on the alternate Wednesdays, I started running different things on Wednesdays. So it just kind of it sort of made the decision itself that just none of us, you know, we weren't really interested in exploring it any further. It was an extremely educational experience playing through that, and I'll bet you we'll go back to it at some point, because there's also a lot of really fun stuff to explore in that, and we never really got that far into the actual dungeon itself. But anyway, that the Barrowmaze campaign is on hiatus right now. I think it's not that we're never going to go back to it. It's just that it will not. If we do, it's not going to be anytime soon. It'll be quite some time down the road. Just transitioning to talk about the Iron Gods campaign. I mean, that is a campaign that is for sure not coming back. So for those who are unfamiliar with it, Iron Gods is an adventure path published by Paizo. And the adventure paths are modules that you know, Paizo publishes one of these individual modules every month, and they are typically, for the Pathfinder ones, they're always 6 modules long, and it takes your characters usually from first up until around like 16th to like 20th level, depending on the adventure path. And there's a plot that runs through the entire length of it too. And with that particular campaign, there's 2 reasons that I had for actually running this particular game. And we ran it using Pathfinder First Edition. That's the game that it was written for. So although I did spend an awful lot of time converting the material for the first adventure and most of the second adventure over to 5th edition D&D a couple of years ago, I was interested in trying it with the system that it was written for. I have a very mixed experience with Pathfinder First Edition. I love the books. I love a ton of the ideas that are in them. And yeah, so I decided to try running it that way. And for those who are unfamiliar with Pathfinder First Edition, and I mean, it's one of the most popular games in the world, or was for the last like 10 years. So, but the way that I saw it differing, particularly from some of the other games I was running, is that Pathfinder, it reminds me a lot of the old Rolemaster role-playing game, in the sense that it has a rule for everything. If you look at the rule book, if you look at the stuff, there are rules for every kind of situation. And the expectation for kind of like pro level players, or players with a lot of experience with it, is that you will be, as a DM, you'll be running that game with those rules. You know, you won't be fudging things. You won't be just changing things on the fly. And the reason that's important is because there's a great deal of character customization that you can get involved in with Pathfinder. So the players who are really seasoned in that, you end up having them being able to make some very interesting decisions in customizing their characters, but those decisions are going to be based on the idea that you're going to run the game as written, because those mechanical decisions they made in making their character were, you know, played out that way. Or were, you know, they only really have meaning if you're running the game the way that they made their decisions for it. So the players, I actually did something a little unusual with that one. Rather than running with my existing players or with viewers who know the kind of game I run, I actually solicited players from the Paizo message board. So yeah, I did have one friend who was playing in another game already join the game, and then I had a viewer join the game as well. But the other 3 players are people I had not played with before, who were all Pathfinder vets. They were people I met on the Pathfinder boards. And from the get-go, I did have a bit of a concern about it, and I ended up shooting a video that kind of set out like, look, just guys, this is what you should expect from the kind of game I'm going to run. And I posted the I've actually got maybe I should add the link in here, but I did post that video to the channel broader too. It was originally just a private video. But my concern was in particular that, like, I didn't want to be feeling chained to the rules as much as you know, because in other games I don't do that. Like a lot of the OSR games, and I mean, to be honest, any game, I kind of like, I don't want to have things slow down for us to just find the, you know, quote unquote right way to do things. I just want to be able to make things up on the fly, and sort of, if we need to look it up afterwards, do that. And I also didn't want there to be a lot of discussion. And that's maybe just me retroactively looking back, seeing how things played out at the table. But anyway, so we then started playing, and the players themselves were great. Like I was happy to meet all of them. We had a lot of the role playing was really terrific, and then we got to playing, and the first part of it, maybe I should mention as well, two of the players had actually played through the adventure path before, so they were clear, or at least the first parts of it. So they were clear with what parts were part of the official module and what parts were not. And regular viewers of the channel will know that I like making shit up. Like I like adding to things and whatnot. And the thing that the way that works for my DM style, I think, is that when if I'm improvising thing, or I'm like, oh, okay, some players introduce that thing, we'll run with it, and now that's canon. The players don't know one way or the other the shit that I'm making up on the fly, or the stuff that was pre-written. And the reason I think that's important, not just because I'm a lazy DM or whatnot, it's because it's all authentic parts of the story. Then, if they don't know the difference between the shit that I added on the fly and the stuff that I had pre-planned ahead of time, then that means all of it, as far as they're concerned, is valid story. That's all what was intended. That's all part of this rich story experience. But if you are clear, if you can see the strings, if you can see the seams where you bolted on new material and new content to the existing story, then that's a little, I think that takes you out of the story. How can it not? And with a adventure path like this, like there is a clear path through this stuff. It's expected that you're going to play through all of these stories. You can't start in one module and then go and do something crazy as the players and then expect to follow on to the next one. The expectation is that the plot will go through all of these things. And that also was something that I had the lingering doubts about in my head, because like I do really love just seeing where a campaign goes and then writing a story around where the players want to go. So that sort of played against my sensibilities as a DM as well. And but the thing is that it is genuinely a really fun module to read. Like all of them are really great. I've mentioned them on the channel quite a few times before. I've mentioned them on my podcast quite a few times before. The setting itself, just in a nutshell, is a science fantasy setting. So it's very like Thundar the Barbarian or like He-Man kind of, but with D&D sensibilities put in there as well. And the sequence of the adventure path is pretty cool as well, where it goes from a dungeon crawl to a sandbox, to a dungeon crawl, to a sandbox, to a sandbox, and then back to a dungeon crawl. And that's awesome. So I thought like, oh, this will be a lot of fun to play through. And we ran the first, I think we got 6 or 7 sessions in, I think 6 sessions. And the first couple of sessions were all stuff for setting the scene. It was a slow burn start to it. And the reason I had that was because the way that the adventure path starts off officially, I thought was kind of silly. I thought that there was a better way to make the instigating event more interesting. So we did that, made some connections to the town and whatnot, and then we kicked it off. And I found that as soon as we got into the actual module itself, it really started killing my interest in it. And not just because it was I have a long-standing bias against dungeon crawls just because I find them really fucking boring. Like I often have a hard, and by that I mean I've traditionally had a hard time running them. The way that I have learned to enjoy them is really by running more old school games and by playing in more old school games, because when the thing with those older games, with the danger and whatnot, and the requirement that you, the player, are interrogating the scene and whatnot, and trying to, figure out if there's traps and whatnot, that you're engaging with that material rather than just making I'm going to make a spot, check, or I'm going to make a perception check and see if there's any traps. And that's the thing that I found as soon as we got into that section, it really did come crashing down, where I'm like, fuck, like this. There's a lot of discussion of mechanics throughout it. I don't think there was an awful lot of, I tried my best to really keep the drama going, but there was so much talk about game modifiers and then like cross chatter about potential builds and how the rules play out. And it's just like, there is a degree of I can see where the degree of enjoyment is. If it's a game system you really love and you really love, theory crafting your way through it, my relationship with hero system and with GURPS is very much like that. Like, I love the idea of building and whatnot, and the way you can really make the rules do what you want them to do. So I understand that. But for the type of game that I enjoy running right now, when a thing will bog down to just a lot of mechanics and talking and stuff like that, and when the mechanics I found in quite a few circumstances in the course of the sessions we played, where the mechanics were intruding significantly on the fiction, I was really finding that, like, this is not a system that is facilitating a better game experience. It is something that is intruding on it more and more. Like, we had a scene where someone fell, this trap fell off, and one of the players, his father, got his legs cropped underneath it, and they're shattered. Is the way I described it. And then the player's reaction was, well, how much hit points damage did he take? I'm like, well, no, like, that's not what I just fucking said. No, you can't heal his legs. And that's the sort of and again, it's not a fault to the players. It's that the kind of game that I thought I was running was different from what they were expecting, and it's because Pathfinder rules. There's a rule for everything. So a giant fucking heap of junk falling on someone, I can find how much damage that does if I look it up in the books. And yeah, and then I think, like, in comparison to some of the other games I was running at the time, in particular, the Starfinder. Like, I've been running Starfinder for about 5 months now. I fucking love that game. It is so much fun to run. It's so much fun to prep for. It's just a, man, like, and it's not quite as codified where everything has a rule as what Pathfinder is. It's got a robust set of rules that you can play with. But I compare how much Starfinder intrudes on my on the fiction versus how much Pathfinder did. And Pathfinder, you could not get away from the rules. Everything had some fucking rule for it, so it was just constantly intruding. And the other thing is, as much as I really loved reading the adventure path and I loved the story in there, I was not as enamored with running it. Like, going through that adventure in a very regimented way, I just wasn't enjoying all that much. I really, and I'll tell you, one of the things that particularly affected it was the milestone system. So I, not on the channel necessarily, but on my podcast, I've talked quite a bit about incentive structures and how you incentivize different gameplay or different rewards, for players. And, like, for instance, giving money, giving XP in certain games that have XP, giving levels or fractions thereof in different things, or giving reputation, ways, influence with different power players or factions within your setting. In some of the other games I run on the channel, that's what we do. We've got factions that people interact with and whatnot. Our Barrowmaze campaign did that. But in an adventure path, it's really hard to do that. It's hard to, for one, add something else into the game that will attract the player's attention, because if you're drawing them away from the actual, like, ongoing plot of the AP, you're not playing through it then. And that's not a problem. Like, I mean, I don't mind, myself personally, I don't mind going off the beaten path and be like, all right, well, now this is what this campaign is about. But if you've got players who have signed up for playing through that, particularly ones that know what the sort of story beats are for that, how do they not have in the back of their mind, well, when the fuck do we get back to the thing that we're here to do? So that was also, if that was causing problems. And with the milestone advancement thing, I don't have anything in an adventure path that I can really use to incentivize the players mechanically with, like, hey, I don't have a, an in-game kind of attaboy thing that I can give them. I can't give them partial levels. I mean, I can in Pathfinder to a degree, but I was already exasperated with the amount of intrusion the rules had on the game as it was. So that was not going to be an option for me. The other options are giving disposable magic items, or consumables, and that's would have been an okay way to do that. But that's requires you to set up some kind of, hey, you've done this, here's your reward. And I was concerned about that being too much of a feeling like a video game. Hey, you did a quest, here's your reward. And I couldn't give them XP, so because it's a level-based game, and I was doing, or rather, it was a milestone advancement. So you're not collecting XP to inch your way towards that level. You're just hitting a certain part of the story, and then boom. And then also, I mean, by virtue of tying it to the milestone as well, what that meant was that we had to hit a certain point in the story. There were clear story-based goals that they were going to be mechanically rewarded for. And I really don't like that. Like for the games I run, I like, you know, I don't want there to be a clear path to success in it. You know, I want the players to be able to keep going along, and I don't mean necessarily like that. Oh, a challenge has been presented, and here's the one way you do that. These adventure paths are not written like that. It's just that you need to hit a certain point in the story in order to get your next level. You know, and Pathfinder doesn't. It doesn't lend itself to easy reskinning. In Starfinder, it's a fucking breeze to, if I need to bump things from CR4 to CR6, it's super easy to do because it's just, you look at the Alien Archive and I can adjust the numbers accordingly. Very, very easy. So if players are gaining levels too quick in that, I don't really care. In Pathfinder, it's a lot more work to do. You know, there isn't a clear codified list. You build monsters very much the way you build characters. So anyway, it just, but as a result of those multitude of problems that it was, I really was feeling hemmed in and not really enjoying just seeing players go through a preset adventure path. One of the things I liked seeing as a DM, you know, part of the joy I get out of this is seeing how the players respond to the broader situation and the plans they choose to take, not just walk through a preset adventure, you know, beats. So there was that, and then the combination of the adventure as well, or the mechanics as well, just really didn't jive with me. I rewatched my first quarter State of the Union, and I saw I was bitching a bit there about, quite a bit there about the Pathfinder system. So, and I don't intend this to be a slight on the Pathfinder system. Everyone likes different things. You know, people like cilantro, people don't like cilantro. You know, it's different strokes. But for me, the kind of game that I like running, it's just not a good fit for me, you know, and that has actually been fairly educational for some other games that that I've been dallying with or thinking about. Like for instance, Rollmaster. Rollmaster is something that is a game I loved when I was a kid. It's a very crunchy, rules heavy game. And I had been thinking about getting that back to the table soon, which would have required quite a bit of work on my part. And I think that what this lesson has taught me is that unless I'm playing with people who don't have who are totally either brand new to Rollmaster and will not know when I'm breaking the rules or ignoring rules or whatever, or players who are on board with me just ignoring shit when I want to, you know, for the sake of a better story, that's probably not going to be a good fit. I would probably end up having a similar experience where the rules I would find, or discussion about rules, would intrude too much on the fiction for my taste. So, I mean, alternatively, another way, a completely valid way of looking at this is that like I'm just too stupid or not, detailed, focused enough to run a Pathfinder game effectively, and that could very well be true as well. But what I know is just that the Iron Gods game is just not. I have not been really I'm not at the point where I wasn't enjoying it, but it was feeling like a great deal more of a chore than something I could just sit back and enjoy. The only real upside to the experience, I mean, there's a couple of ones. One is scratching that itch. This has been a white whale for me for quite a long time, so it was great to just give it a try, you know. And I had not really given Pathfinder First Edition a chance on a campaign, and I've seen it enough at the table now for me to judge that it's probably, run rules as written. It's really not for me. It's not a game it doesn't run the kind of game or kind of experience at the table that I really want. So yeah, I mean, that was great. And also I've met a bunch of really terrific players in the course of that as well. So there's been, what I said at the outset last weekend is when I let my players know that, here's the reasons why I'm not interested in playing. But what I've given everybody is right of first refusal on whatever game I replace that with. And this past weekend, yesterday, at the time of recording, we actually had two of them jump back in, and we played Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea. And the next session of or what would be our next Iron Gods Day is the date of our annual gaming marathon. So I wasn't going to run it that day anyway. But when we come back, I think that it'll be Ash, Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea, that'll replace that, which means that I'll have two different Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea games going each Saturday, which is pretty fucking cool because I absolutely love running that game. So those are the two games that were ongoing that are gone now. Maybe I'll quickly mention the games that are ongoing. So I mentioned the Starfinder game that I have been had ongoing, and we had session 7 earlier today, and I absolutely love that game. We've had 2 players unfortunately drop out. One dropped out very quickly at the beginning. Another was hoping to join the game, but life got too busy for him, so he had to drop out as well. But boy, oh boy, like what a fun game. The Starfinder game itself is I'm having a great deal of fun with. It is. I'm hoping energy level dependent that either tonight or tomorrow I'm going to be recording one of my fairly lengthy overview videos about Starfinder. It's something I've had in the pipe for quite some time. It's just been a while, so I intend to have a really long, thorough look at what Pathfinder or Starfinder is and what's in Starfinder and whatnot. I may have said Pathfinder there. I meant Starfinder. Pathfinder's on my brain apparently. But that campaign is we're playing through an adventure path, interestingly, an adventure path that is only 3 modules long. It's called Against the Aeon Throne. And man, like, so Starfinder, for one, is I love how easy it is to run. I love the sensibilities of the setting. It's so unique of a game as well, too. Like, it really... Starfinder is, and I'm going to, this is a bit of a preview for my my overview, but Starfinder is so much its own creature in the same way that like D&D is its own thing. D&D has influences from Robert E. Howard and from J.R.R. Tolkien and from Michael Moorcock and from what's his name, the guy who wrote Tarzan, Edgar Rice Burroughs, and John Carter and whatnot. So there's all these H.P. Lovecraft and Ashton Clark Smith and all these influences together. It's not any one of those things. It's all of those things and more. That's why D&D is just, I think, sometimes has a hard time replicating any one of those things because it's really its own thing. And in the same way, Starfinder is its own thing too. When I initially got Starfinder, I'd mentioned on the channel before that I was not massively sold on it, and I think it's because I was playing a lot of Traveler at the time, and I was comparing that as a sci-fi game to another sci-fi game, and it just did not seem like a good fit. And it's not the right way to assess Starfinder. Starfinder is its own thing in the same way that D&D is its own thing. Starfinder you can see bits of Star Wars in there. You can see bits of Dune. You can see bits of Shadowrun. You can see bits of D&D. You can see, or maybe more accurately, Pathfinder. You can see bits of, gosh, what else is in there? The Expanse, Firefly. Like there's elements of all those different things, and some of the RPGs too. There's elements of Traveler in there, and Star Frontiers. But it's its own thing, it's really its own thing. And that's awesome. Like I don't need the game to be, to take it so I can run a, what do you call it? Accurate Star Wars campaign or an accurate Star Trek campaign. I need it to run a campaign that is Starfinder, where I can also take elements from other things and repurpose them and make them fit in Starfinder. It's not about making Starfinder fit for other settings. It's about making other setting concepts fit into Starfinder. We're playing through the adventure path in that one, and you would expect that, and we're using a milestone advancement system, and you might think that would be weighing on me, that in the same way that the what do you call it, the Iron Gods one does, but it doesn't. I have a total blast every time we play. The way that the mechanics are set up, where there's sort of difficulties and challenges are keyed to your level, is awesome. It makes for really exciting tactical encounters. It makes for competent characters. You're not playing the chumps who are having a 20% chance of succeeding at really difficult tasks. They're having it's been great. It's just a really, really exciting and fun game. So that will be continuing to go on hopefully for very, very long. I love the players in that. It's a great mix of new players and old players, and I fucking lucked out. Rolled a nat 20 on that one because it's a great group of players, and yeah, just I'm really enjoying that that campaign an awful lot. Other ongoing games are my ongoing boom, Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea campaign set in my setting of Tula, which is kind of like an appendix to the existing setting. This game is my favorite role-playing game right now. I absolutely adore running this for any groups. In the last couple of weeks, actually maybe only in the last week, I have introduced 2 new groups of people. No, 2 weeks. 2 new groups of people to the game. And I run it with a couple of house rules for it to tweak it just to my own sensibilities. Actually, it's not a couple. I have a shit ton of house rules. Like I use the old AD&D Wilderness Survival Guide in mine. I use Pathfinder's Ultimate Intrigue, and I use Pathfinder's Wilderness Adventures, and I use the old AD&D Oriental Adventures book for some things. And there's all sorts of stuff, sources I draw on. The Monster Manual too for AD&D. I've still stolen stuff from there. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about that, is that I can just grab whatever the fuck I want and toss it in there. The one campaign we have has had a lot of wilderness survival stuff. We've played 9 sessions of it so far, and that whole time that the players have been making their way towards the capital city, effectively, or the place that is the kind of home base for this exploration campaign on this brand new continent, and that's been a lot of fun. But the 2 more recent ones is I ran one new group that will end up in my Tula campaign at some point, or at least the setting. Them through a pre-made module, and then I ran a second group this weekend through to be honest, an old Al-Qadim, the Arabian Adventures setting for D&D. I reskinned that and added, some plot elements to tie into my Tula setting. Introduced them to it as well, and man, I love that game. Like, it's just it plays very quick. It's very easy to improvise. It hits that. It's very easy to prep for. Very easy to throw things in at the last minute. It's very easy to repurpose old material as well too. So any first edition, second edition AD&D stuff is really requires no work on my part, and even other stuff like I've stolen some material, like I said, from Pathfinder, from D&D 5th that I'm using in it, and all of that stuff is very easy to reskin into it. So it's a great. It hits the style of play that I think I've been sort of searching for in my in the exploration I've had of the OSR in the last little while. I prefer this to be honest, to any other system. Watching my last video, actually my last quarterly update, I saw that I mentioned I was really interested in running Adventurer Conqueror King again, using the Barbarian Conquerors of Canahu setting. And I did have a chance to do that, and it favored very poorly as compared to the experience I had with Ash. So it was, I think I just, at the last time I had run that was before the new year, before I really got this new campaign going. And Ash just, the way that all the little tweaks that have been made to the AD&D system to suit Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea, plus the little things I've made. The minor modifications I've made to it are relatively minor. Like it's little things to make, add cantrips, have hero points kind of thing in it. But the core mechanic of the game itself is just phenomenal. It feels, it has great tactical, crunchy depth to the combat without really dragging things down. It has exciting and fast resolution. You can run really excited. Like one of our sessions that was only about 2.5 hours was these guys infiltrating this kind of like smuggler's lair, and they fought like 30 enemies in the course of the whole thing. That's like, that would bog down like crazy in other games, and this still was really exciting and thrilling, and characters are moving around and stuff. So it's great. It's just I really, and in my regular ongoing campaign, the guys are infiltrating a keep, which is just bonkers. It's a ton of fun. So anyway, so that game is going forward. I'm looking forward to, obviously, my one core kind of ongoing campaign with that, and it seems like I'm gonna have 2 other groups of PCs that will be exploring different parts, and I love that idea. Like I had talked about running my Barrowmaze game as a West Marches style game where everyone was just going to explore the Barrowmaze. And the thing I like about this is got a lot of the payoff that I was expecting from that. And if you're not familiar with a West Marches style game, what that means is basically just it's a rotating cast of players every session. The traditional West Marches, it's the players who set a date when they want to play and they set what they want to do, and then the DM just kind of makes themselves available, and then they run it, the sandbox game, that way. I'm not running it quite like that, but you know, I've got pretty comprehensive faction rules that are at play. So there's all different factions that players can interact with, or they can just go out and do, you know, explore tombs and dungeons and shit like that, or, you know, become pirates. There's all sorts of different stuff they can do. And I'm randomly generating the reaction of the different factions, the initial reactions to the players' start. So each player, you know, even though it all takes place in the same world, there's potentially overlap between the different characters. You know, some players will have, you know, make alliances with one group where another player will be like, no, they're fucking evil. Like, why are you allied with them? And I'm enjoying that a lot. And I've been enjoying the different styles of play too. Like it's Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea is one of those games that just continually surprises me more and more about the different ways that I can enjoy running that game. So yeah, and my buddy Matt from the Jowsum's Den channel on YouTube, who is runs a bunch of terrific actual play sessions or campaigns on his channel. He's going to be running Ash for me in later in the year too, so that's great. What other games we've got going on? Oh, we've got Warhammer Fantasy 4th Edition is a game that we've been running with three of our players. I took it out to hold it up as a prop, and then I subsequently lost the damn thing. Oh, here it is. This is one that we've had ongoing as well too. This has been a little less. We have been playing through a module from the 3rd edition of the game. I went pretty crazy for the 3rd edition of the game, and I had a lot of different. I mean, I've got everything for the 3rd edition, and even though it's a completely different system from this one, it's very easy to reskin those things into this. And we've had an okay. I mean, I've had a good time running it. The mechanics of the system are pretty good. Not pretty good. They're really good. The characters are really interesting. It's a beautiful book, but I'm not. I don't know. In comparison to the OSR games, I think I'm having more fun. Not OSR, with Ash. I'm having more fun with Ash than I am with that campaign. And we've had some difficulty with consistent attendance on that one as well too. So knowing that part of the reason why, you know, the Traveler or the Traveler, geez, I'm thinking of all sorts of games. The Starfinder game and the Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea one, the Reavers of Tula game is so solid is because we get the same players all the time. You know, maybe one person is not able to attend, but it's continuity of players. And you know, I think what I might haven't made decisions on it yet, but I think that just the campaign, it might be better to take those Fridays when I'm running that and just run either something new or run Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea, because the players from that game now have PCs in the Ash campaign. So and it's not a slight that one. It's interesting because it's not the game itself that has that is causing me to kind of waffle on it. It's a good system, but I did get a chance to play a competing system, and that was Zweihander. So Zweihander is this game that kind of came up when Warhammer Fantasy was at Fantasy Flight, and they had developed their own kind of version that had proprietary dice and whatnot. So it bared no mechanical similarities to the previous editions. Zweihander kind of came up as an answer to that, you know. And I never played it back in the day. The only experience I had was I picked this up and I read it before I got my Warhammer Fantasy 4th, and I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. There's a lot of neat ideas. It's a fucking massive tome, so the likelihood of me sitting down and, you know, getting through all this material was pretty slim. And then Warhammer Fantasy 4th came out, and I really loved that. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to run Zweihander anytime soon, so I'll just, you know, stick it away at the back of my shelf. And then lo and behold, another friend that I have met, Pete of Garblag Games, another streamer as well too. Pete offered to run Zweihander for us, for me, for Matt, and for two other streamers, Jason and Matt from the Old World podcast. We had a one session that was a crossing the streams thing. We all kind of got together on Pete's channel, and Pete ran the game for us. And holy fuck, did I have a good time with it. Like, I was genuinely surprised how not only how interesting the character generation was, but how much fun I had at the table. And one of the reasons I think why, I mean, I rolled pretty well, I think, for a lot of the games. So there's to a degree, there's that, that old adage of like, if you want someone to really fall in love with a board game, let them win the first time. But I don't think Pete did that. It just, and I don't think it was just the good dice rolls. It's a really fucking solid game. It has some of the key differences are streamlined skill rules, streamlined checks. There's a neat mechanical tweak where you can flip dice. You get special abilities as well on top of your skills and your feats and whatever. You also get special abilities that come from your different classes. So I was playing a nun, a decrepit old nun, and I had so much fun playing her. Part of that is a credit, obviously, to Pete for running a really terrific game. But the system itself, I was really, really impressed by it. And in the same way that I'll talk about it in a moment with the One Ring, how much fun I had playing that, it really made me think of like, geez, I should really take another look at this. So the downside to Zweihander is I still don't know what I would do with it just yet. I'm not sure what story I really want to tell with it. But what I can say is that, like, boy, is it a good game. Like, I had a lot of fun. Obviously, it's a fucking monster of a book. So there's a lot to go through. But both Matt and on Jowsum's Den and Pete on Garblag Games, they both have actual plays of it. So if I wanted to learn more about it, I guess I can go there and learn more. But even having played through it, like, it just, boy, oh boy. And the other significant thing that's a difference is that it doesn't have hit points. It has wound thresholds, which I felt was a lot more immersive than just the hit points. At first, I said, nah, whatever, it's not going to be a big difference. But then actually playing through it, it's a really, really interesting game, And I don't think there used to be a time when you can get a free copy of the PDF. That's no longer the case. But yeah, Zweihander's got me thinking about like, I would be interested to see how my players would respond to it, and because it is a very distinctly different animal than what Warhammer is. But in the same way that I found, when I love the Conan 2D20 game, and it's a really, really great game. But one of the reasons why I've been preferring Ash to that, which have a similar sort of sword and sorcery vibe, is because I feel a lot more freedom with Ash. Ash is not constricted by Howard's world. I don't feel like I'm fucking things up or fucking up the experience of the players when I introduce things I want to that are not, quote unquote canon, because with Ash, it's whatever I want to do. Whereas with Conan, I would have that. So that may have had an effect on my enthusiasm for Warhammer Fantasy 4th. It's not to say it's a bad game. It's a beautiful book. I think it's probably the strongest edition of the game that's been published so far. But boy, Zweihander's a really good game too. so there's that. Let's see here. What else? I mentioned that I was playing as well too. I did get a chance to play in actually on my channel. My buddy Erlen Walker ran a session of One Ring for myself and for some of the other players from some of our different games. So Colin and George from our Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea game from Saturdays, they played in that as well, as did John from our Iron Gods campaign. And boy, was that a good game. Like, it's for a player who likes interfacing with lots of, small games or mini games in it, like mini systems. I enjoyed the hell out of that. And it really felt like the experience that I have in my mind of what I thought an authentic kind of Tolkien experience would be was totally captured in there. It was we got to have some really, really great role-playing opportunities. I played a hobbit, so I played a non-combat kind of supporting character and felt like I had a ton of stuff to do in every session. So it's another game that I've had for a long time, and I did not quite appreciate just how good it is. And when I talk about the games going forward, that is obviously going to be one of the things coming up. So let's talk about the the games that I for sure have coming up. So maybe first off, we've got the charity games. So these are for games that people have donated through the Heroes Save Villages campaign. They've donated $100 and asked me to run a game for them. So the games I've got are, the next one is the Legend of the Five Rings Fantasy Flight version of Legend of the Five Rings. We're playing a session called the Siege of, oh gosh, what is the name of the, I can't remember the Rokugan Japanese name for it, but it is Violence Behind Courtliness City. So it's the Siege of Violence Behind Courtliness City. And we've got 4 players in that who are all playing Lion Samurai, and it's going to be, I think, a lot of fun. I was struggling with the kind of the concept for that particular adventure, but I finally locked onto something, and I'm really excited to run that. That one is going to be, I don't think it's going to be before the gaming marathon, but it'll be shortly afterwards. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Then after that, I've got 2 sessions of Champions where we've got I think a really interesting setup where the players are playing the grandchildren of a group of supervillains from the 1950s. And yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. So that's going to be 2 sessions of Champions. If you're not familiar with Champions, it's a superhero role-playing game. It's an old classic. It is a old love of mine. It is one of my favorite games of all time, and I'm really looking forward to running that. After that, I'm going to be running a one-shot of Star Wars, the Fantasy Flight version, for George, for one of the regular players from our Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea game, and a bunch of other games now. To be honest, George has been able to join us for a lot more stuff lately. And then after that, I have a session of One Ring that I'm running for Ireland Walker, and for that one, I recently picked up this old adventure module for MERP, for the Middle-earth role-playing, about the Gondorian kinstrife. So if you're unfamiliar with the legendary, or the kind of Lord of the Rings legendarium, this event takes place about 1600 years before the events of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. This is a time when there was a massive civil war in Gondor. And to prep for this, I actually didn't know that this has been a long plan of mine for years and years, like more than a decade, of an idea of running something during that time, dating back to when Decipher owned the rights to the Legend of the Fire, or the Lord of the Rings role-playing game. And then when Arlen had made the donation and requested this game to run One Ring, I was like, fuck, I mean, he's a big Tolkien nerd. I'll bet you he'd love that. And then I found out that someone else already had this idea, so they published this module for it. And I was fortunate enough, Greg, my buddy who works at my friendly local gaming store, the Sentry Box, who plays in a bunch of my games now too, Greg was able to track this down in their back lot. So that and the Minas Tirith source book. So we're going to be playing a session of a very special session of the One Ring set during the Gondorian kinstrife. So that is going to be pretty fun to write and to run as well. And then the most recent one too, one of our other regular players, Robert, has made a donation as well. So I'm going to be running a special one-shot of Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea for him. And we haven't talked about the particulars for it, but what I'm likely going to do is I'll write something really special that is going to add another plot point to our Tula campaign, because the last charity session that I ran for him actually kicked off. It was the founding story, the prologue, as it were, to our Tula campaign. So yeah, so that's going to be pretty cool. So that's the campaigns, or the charity sessions that I've got coming up. In terms of the games to replace, so I've got some games right now that I know for sure I'm getting to the table, because I've got I got either players together, or I've got a clear idea of what I'm doing, or I've just got things that are, things are really capturing my attention right now, and things that I know I want to get to the table, the channel, because I think they would make for good streams as well. And I think that it would be an opportunity to shed some light on some of this. I mean, not necessarily new stuff, but some types of play that maybe aren't having a lot of, exposure. Sorry, I'm flipping back and forth between a document and monitoring the stream too. I see that there's some folks in chat too, so I'll say howdy in a moment, guys. I'm just going to get through the initial stuff here. Two other games I mentioned before I go on. I mentioned the last update as well, were the Mecha Hack and the Forbidden Lands. Now, the Mecha Hack, I'm actually going to be playing in the near future with my buddy Chad. Chad plays in quite a few of our streams as well. He plays in the let's see, he plays on. I'm drawing a blank here. The Barrowmaze campaign, and then he also drops in a couple other things too. He's going to be playing our Five Rings game. Barbarian Conquers Cthulhu. He played in a pretty substantial one shot of that as well. Anyway, Chad is going to run that for me, and I'm not sure if we're streaming that or not. But Chad is actually he's the author behind the Thunder Road trilogy, which is this really cool urban fantasy kind of diesel punk set of like Norse myths meet urban fantasy stuff set in the prairies in Canada. And as well as a new Graveyard Mind is his new the first book in his new trilogy too, which is another kind of Canadian urban fantasy thing. Anyway, like Chad's books are terrifically enjoyable, but it's cool having an author run stuff for you, because that there's going to be stuff done ahead of time, not just making up shit in the fly like a Bush League DM like me does. So he's running a mashup of Mecha Hack with what do you call it? Keeping the Borderlands. So I'm really looking forward to trying that. So I'm not going to bother running Mecha Hack because I'll have a chance to play it. And Forbidden Lands has been something that we've talked about a fair amount on the not necessarily on the channel. I mentioned it in the last update, but I think it's a great game, and I like what I like the. I mean, I shouldn't sound like I'm underselling it. It looks like a fucking terrific game. But the thing is, I don't know if it would be giving me anything substantially more than what I'm getting in some of my other games. I've got one game that is a sandbox wilderness exploration, fairly lethal, old school style game, right, with Ash. And that's what Forbidden Lands is intending to simulate. And obviously there's going to be some other things that are different, about it. It's got a completely different mechanic and whatnot. And it does have this whole like improvised story thing, but I'm kind of doing that in my campaign anyway. And I also, because of the my incorporation of the Wilderness Survival Guide, I have already really heavily gamified travel rules, survival rules and stuff like that. Characters trying to find water, characters trying to find shelter and making fire to survive the environment, finding food. That's already a substantial part of my game. So I'm just not sure there's going to be something substantially new that would add to my slate of games that I'm running currently. So while it's a terrific game, I just don't know if it is different enough to merit having that running at the same time I'm running my Ash campaign. So the other thing is the Ash campaign, I get to do kind of a combination of improvised stuff with random encounters and random elements and whatnot, as well as, continual me to be able to do creative work behind the scene too. Those who are regular viewers may know that in addition to being a giant gaming nerd, I'm an art nerd as well too, and I do an hour of drawing every day, and I've been doing that for about 6 years now. And the thing I've been working on lately has been an overall map of my my Tula campaign, and like the map itself, because I made the scale for an initial campaign, and then it kind of blew up from there. The map itself is about 1.1 1.25 the size of Canada, so it's this massive continent, and so there's a lot to draw and color and paint and whatever with it. But that's part of the fun with that campaign as well, as I get to indulge other creative endeavors with it. So knowing that I'm not likely going to stop that campaign anytime soon, I just don't think that Forbidden Lands is going to be offering such a substantially different flavor to what I'm already getting. So that's what for the games that I was sort of considering last time. In terms of the schedule, so our Wednesdays, we have been running a hack of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, where we've been playing in the World of Warcraft setting. And that's been really off and on, and it's been a different kind of group for the last, it's been on and off the last 2 weeks. I've been too busy at work to be able to run it on Wednesdays. So I'm not... we are going to have regular Wednesday sessions going forward, but I'm not sure if we're going to continue on with that or not. I'm going to send an email to the the players and kind of take a poll, see how jazzed everyone is. If they're really enjoying that campaign, then I can find enthusiasm to go back to it. It's been a lot of fun to run. I love the setting. But if they're willing to try or interested in trying something different, then some of these games I'm going to mention, they may slot in there. I also don't have a game on alternate Sunday afternoons. I currently run my 3-hour Starfinder sessions on Sundays from noon till 3 my time, which is Mountain Time. And I think what I might do is add kind of a flex day on alternate Sundays so I can run other stuff, some of these other games that I'm thinking about running. And then I've also got a Friday where that might be a flex Friday as well. So right now there's if you like to watch us live, there's going to be a little bit of uncertainty as to what's actually being run on the channel at those times right now, because one of the things that if you're a longtime viewer of the channel, that I very much want to see a game at the table before I really have a final judgment on it. And part of that requires us, experimenting, giving it a try, seeing how we enjoy it, and seeing how it plays at the table. As viewers, I can appreciate that sometimes what that means is that, you go along and you don't get resolution for a story. You may get invested in the characters that the players are playing in that. And that sucks. And that's one of the things that makes me sometimes run games longer than I would normally if we were just all playing around a table. But, the way I'm thinking of this is that this is a channel where you get an opportunity to see us play role-playing games, right? And this is to be honest, the reality of role-playing games is because it's not a pre-written script. There is, there's always going to be factors that are changing people's level of engagement with those games. Be that when people are suddenly not available anymore to show up for the game, where they, in the old days, it would be because someone moved away, or someone went to school, or the DM went to school, or whatever. Nowadays, it's just, if you change in your availabilities, you pick up, dodgeball, on Tuesdays or Wednesdays or whatever day, or if you, new significant other, and you want to be able to, devote time to that relationship, that stuff, means that there's changes in availability, which changes the dynamic at the table. And yeah, so what that means is that in any role-playing game, there's going to be times when it just dies out. So while I can appreciate that doesn't, that leaves sometimes some stuff unsatisfied, I'm hoping that the Post-Mortems will help understand or give perspective as to why those things aren't going forward any longer. But what it means is that, going forward, what we'll be doing for those days until we sort of figure what is going to be a good fit for those days, we're going to be trying some different things out. We also might be playing some short modules, shorter adventures to sort of give players who want to jump in and play for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, the chance to do that and then be done with it, rather than having it, a necessary commitment for an ongoing campaign for months and months and months. But anyway, so with that in mind, the things I've got for sure is, let's hear. First up is a very old favorite, Marvel superheroes. So for those who are unfamiliar with this game, this is something that was published, 1986, I think this one came out, 86 or 87. Let's see the publication. This is my very, very beaten old copy. This is the copy, 86. This is the copy that I had as a kid. This is my player's book. It is a superhero role-playing game published by TSR. This is the advanced edition, which came out after the basic set, which was, I think, a year before, maybe 2 years before. But anyway, this game is an old favorite and friend. It's something that I played a lot as a kid. I loved Champions as a kid for superhero games, but I probably played this more than I did Champions, only because it was easier to run. Everything on this in this game is dictated by this thing here called the Universal Table, and the Universal Table gives you find what sort of what rank you have in your relevant ability. You roll 2d10, and then you find out what color result you get from that. And that is as simple as the game is. Everything is dictated by that. The core rulebook as well has stats for heroes and villains in here. This is now 23 years out of date, so the characters are, you've got some pretty great Mohawk rogue hair in there. Sorry, that wasn't really showing up terribly well. There you go. Mohawk Rogue, and you've got or not Mohawk, the Mullet Rogue, and there we go, Mohawk Storm, 80s Storm. But the thing is like the complexity for the characters themselves. You can see there's just there's 7 stats: fighting, agility, strength, endurance, reason, intuition, and psyche, which give the name to the system, which people call the phase rip system. My buddy Chad had mentioned we were recently tweeting back and forth at each other, talking about games we want to play, not run, but play. And he had mentioned that Marvel superheroes he wants to play. And this is his favorite, bar none, superhero system. And he's run it for me quite a few times in the past, and I've really enjoyed it. And I said, you know what, fuck it, I'll run it. And in particular, it's this module we're going to use, Nightmares of Future Past. This is set about, for if you're familiar with the Days of Future Past story from either the film, which is an adaptation of the comic, but the comic in particular, Days of Future Past. This is about 30 years after the events of that, in a kind of dystopian future ruled by Sentinels. So we're doing that, and Chad is using had used and live tweeted characters from the Ultimate Powers book, which you can, the core rule book, the player's book, I should say, has rules for generating characters, as does this. It's an old school game, so it's random generation, and it's so much fun. You know, you don't get to play the character you had in mind, but you get to play some fun other ones. So I'm really looking forward to that. I did some prep for the campaign, and I've read the rules, and there's a lot more to these rules than obviously I ever used as a kid. You know, as a kid, you sort of go with the very basics. Well, I did at least. And even though we had a shit ton of fun with this this game as a kid, I am really looking forward to trying to run it the way it's written, you know, and seeing how that plays, because I think it's going to be a really great superhero experience. It's interesting too, because I have been itching to run a superhero game for the last little while. You know, the wrap up of the 20 or 10 years or 11 years of Marvel films probably have played a factor in that, but I've been itching to run a superhero game for quite a while, so that's going to be a lot of fun. And we're probably going to get some other players in it as well, and let them randomly generate their mutants and sick them, sick the dystopian future on them as well. That's going to be streamed as well. I also have a very popular request right now. Is RuneQuest Glorantha. So this is a box set I did an opening, a unboxing for a while ago, and a couple of weekends ago, well, about a month ago at this point, I took a deep dive into the books, and I found on my shelf I've had this sitting there, which is the Quick Start, and I've been really interested in running this partly because I don't have any past experience. It's one of those games that when I was a kid, our circle of friends never. You know, no one ever got it or had it bought for them, so we never really played it. I played a lot of Call of Cthulhu when I was a kid, but I never played this, and it shares the same basic role-playing system. And the setting itself is extraordinarily detailed. Some might say excruciatingly detailed, but they are very clear throughout the rule books to say, no, make this yours. And I'm really interested in seeing how this plays at the table. My plan is I'm going to use the free adventure out of here and the pre-gen characters out of here, and we're going to play it and see how it goes. The things I'm attracted to with it as a player, you get tons of really cool stuff to do, and there's good mechanics for rewarding deep role playing. You know, that your character's passions, the things that they want to do, the things they're interested in, that plays a big role in kind of min-maxing your character. You know, if you want to get a bonus to an attack roll or to a skill check or something like that, you have to, you know, you can dive into a certain role-playing element. You know, let's say it involves your tribe, protecting your tribe or a tribesman or something like that. You can make a roll on your passion for your tribe. And if you're successful, or depending on how successful you are, you get a bonus to your skill. And conversely, if you totally, you know, pooch that roll, then it could have a consequence. You could have a crisis of conscience, you know, or confidence rather, not conscience. And There's also, everybody has magic of varying degrees. There's powerful rune magic, which calls on the gods, and there's spirit magic, which calls on, you know, the kind of ambient power. And that cuts not just from the player characters, but everybody. Like everybody can work some kind of magic, because you're kind of like living in a mythic world, but it's also paired with a very grounded and lethal combat system that is extremely detailed. So I'm not sure. The only thing I waffle on is the whole everyone has magic thing, the level of detail in the game. And the reason is because if everybody has magic and you have a shit ton of magic, I read through one of the adventures in the what do you call it, in the DM's kit that comes with the DM screen. And it's a very, very cool adventure, and it's a beautiful DM screen. Great source books in there, or great handouts and stuff like that in there. The thing is that there's a series of enemies that sort of attack a place, and that sort of kicks off the campaign. And every single one of them has individualized stats. And I get how that's cool in the sense of like it emulates reality and whatnot. But all I'm thinking of is like, why the fuck do I need to know the specific spells that these 6 guys they're not going to interact with them? Like, these are not characters who are like, well, maybe the characters might become allies with them or whatnot. These are dyed-in-the-wool fucking enemies that are there for the players to defeat. So I don't think it necessarily adds substantially more to the game that, you know, Joe Monster number 5 has a different set of spells than Joe Monster number 3, but otherwise is pretty much the same. Like, it's I'm going to run it as written when I get to that. I mean, if we really enjoy this, then sure, I'll see how that goes. But that is one thing that just, you know, for a DM with a busy schedule and who doesn't want to have to be looking up and monitoring a bunch of fucking things, I'm not sure that's really necessary. That feels like it's a real throwback in terms of game design, but I don't know. I mean, like, you know what, I'll have to see how it plays at the table. I'll have to see how the players interact with it and see what the experience is. The game designers who are behind that, who made the decision, have a great deal more experience in game design than what I do. And I thoroughly trust the 2 people who were behind the design of it too. One of them is Jason Dural, who was one of the guys behind the Conan line. He was I think the lead developer of Modiphius's Conan 2D20 line. And he did a great job with that. So I am willing to trust that there's a reason that those guys are designed that way. And I mean, as devil's advocate, maybe one of the reasons is because combat is so detailed, because combat's so lethal, you really don't need, you know, you're not going to need that many more enemies, or that many more enemies for that encounter. It's not going to be like you know, the OSR game I mentioned where people or an Ash game where they're going to be fighting 30 people in a session. The struggle against that small group will be meaningful. So it'll be important to make one of them, you know, stand out from another. So who knows? Well, I'll tell you who knows. I will once I run the damn game. Another game that I have finally got a structure or a way to get it to the table is Star Trek Adventures. So I just recently picked up this, and I don't know why this has been out for a while. It's the starter set for it. I don't know why the hell I took so long to pick this up, but it has a complete kind of mini campaign in it. It's got pre-gen characters. It's got dice. And then this particular game, if you're not familiar with it, this is the newest version of the Star Trek role-playing game published by Modiphius, which has the best DM screen I've ever purchased. It is gorgeous. It's massive, like, you know, LP album sized screen with these terrific handouts for monitoring different stations on a Starship Combat. So, you know, it gives you, yeah, it seems really cool. And the thing is with Star Trek is I don't really, because it's different, I know it shares some commonalities with Conan 2D20, but it's different in some other ways. Rather than having to sift through the whole rule book, I'm really looking forward to playing through the adventure that will teach me and the players how this game actually works. You know, Fantasy Flight Star Wars, their 4 starter sets that they have for their game are the reasons that we ran that game for like 2.5 years, because it's a great, or 2 years, great introduction. So I'm really looking forward to having finally an excuse and an opportunity to get this into play. the Star Trek role-playing games is one of those things that I have loved. I've loved playing in the Star Trek universe since the Star Trek FASA days. I don't have it anymore, the FASA game, but we used to play the Star Trek FASA game, and then when Last Unicorn Games got it, I got everything for that, and then I got everything for the Decipher version, and I got this newest version. The only games I've ever got to the table have been the Decipher one. And I hear this is the best implementation of a Star Trek role-playing game to date. So I'm very excited to see how that goes. And let's see here. What other things are on the hopper here, on the list? There's a recent supplement. Okay, well, recently I also ran on the channel a one-shot of Call of Cthulhu. Now, Call of Cthulhu, forgive me if I'm repeating stuff that you guys already know, but Call of Cthulhu is the oldest horror role-playing game, and it really has not changed substantially from the time of its inception in the early 80s up until the present. And for my personal gaming history, Call of Cthulhu was the game that we played the most in high school. We played some AD&D, and we played some World of Darkness stuff, but I ran a shit ton of Call of Cthulhu back in the day. But it had been about 20 years since I ran Call of Cthulhu in a 20s setting, and I did that recently and thoroughly enjoyed it. I had so much fun in that session, so that it was really a revelation of like, why am I not running this more often? So with that in mind, I'm going to be trying out Pulp Cthulhu. This is a set of optional rules there, and it's an appendix to the 7th edition of Call of Cthulhu, and this is just allows your characters to play in more of a pulpy kind of high, action kind of vein while still running a horror-oriented game. The reason I'm thinking this because while I sort of have all, like a lot of I think they call them keepers in this, a lot of keepers. I tended to kind of run a more heroic style Call of Cthulhu game anyway. So I kind of like that this allows you to really lean into that, not making superheroes, but, making characters who do have that larger than life kind of, presence and capability. The reason I want to run a one shot of this is to really get a sense of how deep that, is this just the pull of nostalgia for me, or is this just the, me, what do you call it? Or is there really I think this would be a really good fit for how I like to run games. And the reason if it does seem to be something that would be a good ongoing campaign, I have this bad boy right here, which is the Masks of Nyarlathotep. And I also picked up the where are they? There we go. The prop set for this, which has all these great, cool handouts that would go with that. And this has rules for running it in Pulp. And what that is this massive, sprawling Call of Cthulhu campaign. So what my plan is, I also have the Horror on the Orient Express, which has been a to-do thing. And then there's this other, I can't remember what it's called, but there's another Call of Cthulhu Pulp adventure, what's it called? The Two-Headed Serpent as well. So there's lots of material I've got for Call of Cthulhu. I've been collecting this stuff for years, partly based on nostalgia. But I mean, if this does seem like a really fun game, and I get a group of players that are really engaged with it, well then, boom, we are going to flip over to that and start playing that. So expect to see that at the channel, at least a one session of Pulp Cthulhu for sure, to see how that goes. What else? Recently, I also picked up a new supplement for the Fantasy Flight Star Wars game. Now, I kind of got burned out on the Fantasy Flight Star Wars game after our player characters hit about 200 or 220 XP. And that campaign was very character focused, and it was a small, tight group. And we ended up losing a fair amount of players for it. So the game kind of fell apart because I was finding it frustrating that I wouldn't know what player were showing up from week to week to week. But I've still been keeping up on the books because I hate having to track down books after a game goes out of print. Their most recent release is this, The Rise of the Separatists. So this is effectively the Fantasy Flight version of a Clone Wars era sourcebook, and I'm a bit of a sucker for that time period anyway, because I just love that. Like the role playing opportunities during that period, I think are really phenomenal. My camera's being a little weird. One second here. Boom, there we go. So the Saga edition had a great source book for that, and it was my favorite source book for that particular edition. The Wizards of the Coast, the last version of Star Wars they published, and I ran a couple sessions set in the Clone Wars during that time. But this was the first time they really actually put an official book out for this, and it is, man, is it full of great ideas. Like, there's great crunch content in it as well, but even just ideas like running a troop style campaign where you play, you know, you have different groups of player characters, and then those, you alternate your campaign between those different things, so you can kind of see different fronts of the war. Very much how they did the Clone Wars game. And that coincides nicely with, I heard from Jeff Talanian, the guy who wrote Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea. And being the ever font of great ideas for gaming, Jeff runs his games where he's got a regular group of people he plays with, but they have 3 different groups of player characters at different parts of Hyperborea. And he surprises them each time they come up. They know they're going to show up, they know they're going to play, but they don't know what characters they're going to play. And I think that's brilliant, you know, and it would be cool to run a campaign in this era in that, you know, in that kind of way where you've got, you know, a group of Jedi and a group of clone troopers and a group of, you know, smugglers. I haven't been as excited about an idea to run these, the Fantasy Flight Star Wars games, I think, since I stopped playing it. You know, I had a good time running the one-shot that I ran for the charity game last year for George. But boy, this has got a lot of great ideas in it. So I would expect, at the very, very least, I would expect that you'll be seeing a one-shot of this game in addition to the charity session in an upcoming thing, because it's very, to be honest, this is another game that's really easy to prep. You know, it's very, especially with the recent release of their, effectively, their like enemies book. I think it's called Allies and Enemies. And it's got it's basically like a monster manual. So it's a bunch of things that your players can fight or, you know, deal with. So those 2 books plus one of the core books, you got everything you need to run a, you know, a complete campaign. So that's pretty exciting as well. Other things that are for sure on the very near horizon. So having the fun that I've had with Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea has really help what it feels like to me, the mechanics of it. It feels like it's an AD&D like 2.75. It has a lot of very, very common. It's got a lot of common things with AD&D, but it, from my perspective, fixed some of the things that I didn't like about it, like how long, you know, how the tactical combat works, how the attributes work, you know, stat bonuses and stuff like that. What it's led me to do is to take a pretty deep dive back into a lot of 2nd edition AD&D and regular AD&D stuff, and thinking about how I could run those with basically the same set of house rules that I run my Ash game with. So for other one-shots, what I would expect, one of my favorite old supplements from AD&D was this and the Monster Manual 2 were the 2 AD&D books I got first, and I just adore them. And I have recently completed my collection of the old Oriental Adventures modules. And I have run one of these before. I've run Swords to Daimyo, but I haven't had a chance to run any of the other ones. And in particular, one of my favorites is this Oshimo, the Spirit Warrior. It's a very cool kind of sandbox, but also story-oriented game. Or adventure, and I kind of would like to at least get 1 or 2 of these to the table and see how they play. You know, use the rules kind of as written for AD&D with some of my house rules in, with cantrips, with, you know, hero points and stuff like that, max hit points, that kind of stuff, and see how it plays. You know, if the players don't dig it, then, you know, we don't play it again. But I'd at least like to get it to the table and see how these old modules hold up. Setting aside the, you know, obviously the kind of cultural sensitivity issues that may come with running that. Any elements that are like that, I'm going to steer clear of. But I think there's a way to use this material in a culturally sensitive way and still have a really kick-ass, old school, good time with these. Another one as well that's an old school thing that I've been reading an awful lot lately. Good old Dark Sun. Oh boy. So this is probably, other than maybe Ravenloft, this is the campaign setting that we played the most of the AD&D 2nd edition games. And now that I've got a set of effectively like AD&D rules that I like and I want to run, I've been diving deep back into this stuff, and I'm finishing prep for running the first module out of here. Now, Dark Sun, over the course of the line's history, ended up going in some directions that I didn't like all that much. But what I'm intending to do is to just run the one adventure out of the core box set, use just as much of the material from that. I am going to use the psionic rules from the expanded, from the second box set that came out for Dark Sun, if you're familiar with that, which I think did a better job of. I like those rules better. They're more streamlined and they're, I think, more coherent. But anyway, that's another one thing that I'm going to be bringing to the table sometime soon. I'm really in the midst of my second edition AD&D Renaissance, and to that end, I have had recently showed up on Friday some print-on-demand versions of the old second edition Dungeon Master's Guide, Player's Handbook, and Monster Manual. Now, I hold these up only because if you are an old school fan, and if you've thought about picking these things up, so these are they're only available in soft cover, which is a little weird because some of the print-on-demand stuff, like the Spelljammer book, is available in hardcover. But anyway, you can only get them in soft cover. But to be honest, the soft cover are great, and the colors are terrific. Whatever scan they were working from for these is great, and it's pretty cool having all the stuff back in physical copy for me. And take a look at this. So this is some of the old Tony DiTerlizzi art that's in there, and it has the version or the print version here really still captures all those colors and details quite nicely. So if you have been on the fence about getting either replacement copies for old things, or you might want to try an old school game other than like an actual old school version of D&D or AD&D, the print on demand versions for the second edition books are really awesome, and I expect to make lots of use out of those for in the near future. One game that I have been thinking about, and I really want to get to the table again, but I honestly don't know what I would do with it, is Mage the Ascension. And this is a game that we played quite a bit when we were kids, and I'm having a fuck of a time trying to figure out how to approach a campaign on this. If anyone has any suggestions on it, please don't hesitate to leave a comment in the comment section below, or shoot me an email at dungeonmusings@gmail.com. Tell me what you might do with it or what you're doing with it, because I love the ideas behind Mage the Ascension so much, and I really want to try and get it to the table. But it's so sprawling that I'm having a real hard time planting a flag somewhere and saying, this is what this campaign is going to be about. So I don't have plans to get this to the table anytime soon, but it's something that is continually, I keep picking it up and keep reading it and trying to think of what I want to do with it. So if you've got ideas, folks, then I'd greatly appreciate hearing that. The comment from my buddy, or the comment that I had about One Ring, it also got me thinking about another game that's got really interesting subsystems to it, and partly driven by the fact that the show is in the news an awful lot lately, and partly because I'm currently reading Fire and Blood. I'm not actually, I have not read any of the other books. I've read World of Ice and Fire, but this seems like a manageable chunk of just kind of interesting backstory for the Targaryens in the Song of Ice and Fire game or setting. I've got Song of Ice and Fire role-playing game. I've run this once before, and I did not do a very good job of running it. So I didn't think it was a very good game when I ran it. But there's two things that have changed my mind on it. One was playing in One Ring, and I realized that there are fun ways to run all the. Like the One Ring, this has lots of mini games in it. There's a set of rules for running mass battles, and a set of rules for intrigues, and a set of rules for running your house, and a set of rules for individual combat. And I thought that just felt like a bit of a mess when I ran it, and that likely had an effect on how I presented it. Separate rules for jousting too, but this seems really, really cool. And it's also written by Robert Schwab. And Robert Schwab is the author of one of my all-time favorite games, Shadow the Demon Lord. So if he wrote it, then I should give it another fucking chance. And the reason I'm inclined more towards this than One Ring is only because I tend to run a darker and more grounded game, I think. I don't run a lot of Wahoo stuff. I don't run, you know, it's just that's where my sensibilities kind of lie. And my, you know, having read or reading Fire and Blood right now, it just got me thinking in that vein, and I would really love to see the players play, you know, all members of the same house. There's a great supplement for this that basically gives you pre-made kind of rival houses. So either you could grab one of those houses and have your players come from that, or, you know, otherwise, or create their own and just have them be the rivals. But the idea of all the characters, not only creating, or the players, not only creating their own characters, but also creating a house, I think would satisfy some of my curiosity about Ars Magica as well. Regular viewers will know I've got a long-term fixation on Ars Magica, where you're playing mages and companions, but also you're all, you know, contributing to how the Covenant, the place where all those characters live, kind of works. This does a similar thing to that, but with the house instead of the, you know, the Covenant. And this also, I think, is an easier buy-in. Most folks who are gamers will are at least passingly familiar with Game of Thrones, so there's less, you know, me explaining everything from the get-go for this. So I think that's I'm looking forward to getting this to the table. There's a one-shot that you actually can get for free. They're quick start with a setting called, or an adventure called The Wedding Night. You know, and I think it's actually Knight in a clever little turn of phrase. And it looks like a really fun adventure to play through. There's intrigue, there's combat, there's, you know, I can't remember if there's war, but in any event, that's a game I'm really interested in getting to the table. Also because there's no magic. You know, you can't play magic characters in it. Getting to the very end here. So just a couple of grab bag things. Those are the games I mentioned there. Those are the ones that I'm actively, you know, I just need to find a date to get it to the table. I've got adventures together, not so much Song of Ice and Fire, but for the other ones, I know precisely what I want to do with them. It's just a matter of getting them into the schedule after the gaming marathon. Song of Ice and Fire is more of a loosey-goosey thing. It's going to be finding a date when that'll be good. And then these other two ones are more just, they're things I'm thinking about. And I'm not sure what I want to do with them, but they have either been brought back to my attention, or it's a game that I love and I would like to try. So one thing, and I don't know if it's going to be, well, it's going to be later in the year, but the One Ring. I had so much fun playing this. I cannot wait to see what I cannot wait to share this game with some of my players. And what I'm going to do is the Bree sourcebook has a good set of adventures for it, where you don't necessarily all need to be from somewhere. It could be just as simple as you guys are all in a tavern, and then this very short campaign kind of kicks off. And the initial adventure in Bree seems to cover a lot of the specific mini games. So it highlights some travel, some intrigue, some combat, and also it plays up many of the signature Tolkien elements. You know, anyone who's seen the Lord of the Rings films has in their mind what the inside of the Prancing Pony looks like, has in their mind what and actually what's his name, Barliman Butterbur, he's not alive in the time of this source book or this adventure, but it's also got enough material so you can kind of go beyond that initial adventure if the players like it, and then they could go elsewhere. Bree is the crossroads to all sorts of other adventures. So if the game goes really well and the players want to keep going, you can lead then into some other adventure. So that is going to be coming in the near future. Well, in the future as well, not necessarily the near future. And then one old game, someone wrote to me or posted on the wall about 2 days ago, maybe, about you know, other old school games. And one of the games he had mentioned, or she, actually, I don't know if it's he or she, but they mentioned was GURPS, the old Steve Jackson Games generic universal role-playing system. This is the 4th edition. These are the core books that make up the basic set for GURPS. And GURPS is a game that was my go-to game, boy, like for years and years. In the late 3rd edition or 3.5 edition of D&D up until the time of about 4th edition D&D, to be honest. That was my go-to game. I ran everything with GURPS. I ran Old West. I ran Pirates. I ran superheroes. I ran Delta Green. I ran fantasy. You know, I ran a couple Eberron campaigns using that as well, and it's a great system. Like it's one of those things where it's easy to learn but difficult to master. If you can download a free version of the rules, which is called oh gosh, it's not called the Quick Start. It's called oh gosh, I don't remember. GURPS Lite. And it's got basically like character creation rules and some combat rules and some spells and whatnot. You can play some low fantasy stuff with just that. It's I think 64 or 96 page thing. And it's great. So if you're not familiar with GURPS, it's definitely worth checking out just to familiarize yourself with one of the, you know, like one of the very, very old point generation games. GURPS has cast a long shadow on the industry. But the thing is that over the years, I have found that GURPS is often more game system than I actually need. You know, you can make GURPS do almost anything. You know, I could, with doing some mathematical tricks and some house rules, you can make supers work. You can make high action stuff work. You can make, you know, police level drama work. GURPS is at its basics. GURPS does a better job of simulating reality in game mechanics than any other game I've ever run. And that's both in terms of like, if you have a certain level of competency, how often you're going to roll a success. Because you roll 3d6 to do task resolution, there's a pretty fat bell curve on that. So task resolution is usually fairly predictable in that. Weapons and stuff like that are modeled for, you know, they're modeled to 2 different kinds. Whether you stab or whether you swing has an effect on how much damage you do as a starting point for the melee weapons you're using. And then the type of damage that weapon does, bludgeoning, slashing, or it's crushing, slashing, impaling. It's not slashing, it's cutting. What is it? Crushing, cutting, impaling, piercing small, piercing large, burning. Like there's all sorts of different things that have different results for your for how things what do you call it? How your flesh reacts to it and how it interacts with armor. Which is it actually is not at the table. It's not that bad. It's very intuitive, but it's a lot of stuff to manage, and that game can be extraordinarily lethal. Which, if you're trying to simulate that style of play, totally makes sense. It also scales high skilled individuals extraordinarily well. It's very easy to make all stuff fit within a reasonable range band. So even if you're having 2 martial arts masters face each other, you can still totally get, you know, it's a manageable way of doing that. I've run Star Wars with this game as well. The thing is that requires a lot of house ruling to get to the point of a game that simulates or plays at the table the way you want it to. It also requires, if you've got players who are really conversant with GURPS, it requires a lot of communication and working with them to create the character that fits the house rules you're intending to use. There are no guidelines on it too. It is a wide open system. There's no limits on it the way there are in hero system and champions. So you can make broken or abusive characters very quickly. There are ways to get around that with templates and stuff like that. But and there's a game that was kickstarted, but it unfortunately almost turfed the company because it lost a shit ton of money. A game called Dungeon Fantasy. It's this deluxe, beautiful box set that has basically the GURPS system tuned to simulate a D&D style 1-2. It's so complex where when I've got the choice of running that versus, you know, another kind of fantasy setting or fantasy game, like say, you know, RuneQuest or Astonishing Swordsman and Sorcerers, Hyperborea, or Song of Ice and Fire, where those games are ready to go to play in that sensibility, why would I pick a game that's going to require me to do a lot more work and have maybe some extraneous, unnecessary complexity to the rules that I don't need? So with all that shitting on GURPS in mind, why on earth would I ever consider, why am I even talking about it? Well, because I love that game. You know, it's I've had so much fun running this for horror in particular, that while I want to run Call of Cthulhu, and I've got terrific memories of that, and I've got great recent experience, there's got to be an idea I can land on with GURPS that would let that system shine, and would allow us to have an experience with my players to have an experience with a point generation system that really lets that whole, lets it shine in the way that other ones don't. One of the third edition of GURPS, one of the amazing things with it, and that is a testament to how flexible the game is there was hundreds of source books for this, for running GURPS in ancient Greece, for running GURPS in Lensman, the Lensman setting, the running GURPS in the Old West, running it in Japan, feudal Japan, running it in alternate Earths, running it with time travel, like the supplements you could get for it, running it in the Napoleonic era. One of my favorite supplements for it is this Age of Napoleon. And that's the level of specific detail you could get with that particular game, and how modular the game was. Now, one of the major downsides right now is that at the time of recording, the publishers of GURPS, Steve Jackson Games, have not really put GURPS as a priority for them. And one of the casualties of that is their character, their proprietary computer program to generate characters is no longer compatible with modern operating systems. So that's a big problem for a game that is really requires a lot of math and purchasing things and whatnot. If you have to resort to pen and paper to create those characters, that's going to be a major turnoff for a lot of players. I've had friends who have been gamers for years who have said that they'll start making a character in GURPS, and by the end of it, they never want to see him again because they hate the process of going through that. One way to get around that is just to play pre-gens, obviously, but yeah. So it's funny because what I said in response to that person was like, for all these reasons, these are all the reasons why GURPS won't work for for play, or I don't think it'll be the right choice for a game that is sword and sorcery style play, especially the style of play that I'm getting with Ash. But man, I got to find something, because it's been a long time since I got this game back to the table, and it's going to be another one of those things like Call of Cthulhu, I imagine, where once I get it playing again, I'm just going to fall in love with it, because it is such a it is such an elegant system. Once you've got everything in place, it runs so well. It's just a matter of getting all that shit in place for it. So that's what we got. That is a very long overview of kind of the games that I've got up in the air in for the coming months. The reasons why the Iron Gods and the Barrowmaze campaign aren't going to be ongoing, and the reason why we might be jumping around a bit for some of the upcoming sessions. The things that are most likely to hit the table very, very soon are, once the gaming marathon is over, are Star Trek Adventures, RuneQuest, and some of that AD&D second edition stuff. In particular, those are the things that I'm really excited about playing and seeing how they play. Call of Cthulhu as well, too, for that matter. So Call of Cthulhu, AD&D second, Star Trek Adventures, and RuneQuest. Those are things that... Did I say RuneQuest twice? I may have. Anyway, those are the ones that are going to be at the table quite soon. And then afterwards, going forward, we've got those other games as games that are hit lists. Now, if you have any thoughts, actually, let's check with chat. Sorry, folks, I've been trying to trying to keep on top. Whoa, I'm way behind. Azura Monkey. Yeah, that book is lovely, but it's big. So one of the things with the Zweihander book is a ton of that stuff is modular. So even though it is a fucking monster, think of this as more like Player's Handbook, DM's Guide, Monster Manual all together. So you compare this, bad boy to second edition D&D, and it looks kind of comparable, I think. There's you don't need to use everything. The amount of stuff you need to read to learn to get this to the table is fairly minimal. And most of that material that's in there is just is not it's not filler, but it's like it's it's got like 100 occupations or something ridiculous in it that characters can be, and every single one of those has an interesting special ability. So like it's full of lots of great options, both in terms of modular rules and in terms of options for players. So the full 600 is not something you need to navigate in order to get that game to the table. What else here? Oh, and Azura, thank you so much for the kind comments. Yeah, I'm glad you've enjoying the content on here. Walter, yeah, Champions is pretty fucking cool. It's the things that are particularly cool about it is I like how crunchy and tactical the combat is in it. Superhero slugfests in comics, in films, are big deals. Like I heard a stat today that last fight in Endgame, and I won't spoil anything if anyone hasn't seen it, but that takes up a third of the film. It's like an hour-long fight, but I never felt it dragged for a second. And that is the thing that, is with, I think Champions does a really good job of, there is rules there to fill in the other parts of, of the superhero experience with like secret identities and, dependent NPCs and things like that. But the rules for building your powers and then using them in a tactical situation are terrific. And it's a lot of fun to play at the table. What else here? Oh yes, yeah, and I love the idea of the what do you call it? Brandon, I think that's you in chat. The idea of the different places you can play in Star Wars, I think that's pretty cool. Spelljammer, yes, Walter, I totally agree. Spelljammer is terrific. I actually just ordered today, because I'm a fucking dummy, I ordered the print-on-demand version of the hardback copy of Spelljammer. So as part of my AD&D second edition kick, I might Nefarious, okay, so afraid to get the you know what, I don't know. So your comment was that the spine on the Mage second edition might split. It's got really great stitching in it. So I haven't, this is the Mage, the Ascension 20. I haven't found that to be the case yet, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe, I haven't actually looked online to see whether anyone else has had a problem with it. I haven't also made a great deal of use out of it. So it's not like I've played the shit out of this game yet and then found that the pages falling out, but I have read it a great deal and I have used it for character generation at least once. And it seems to be holding up okay now, but I don't know. Maybe I should look online before I start abusing the spine on this. The new, yes, Nefarious. There's also there's a new Dungeon Crawl Classics influenced horror game, Old West horror game that's come out. But actually, I've already gone in on Down Darker Trails, and I also have GURPS Old West and GURPS Horror, and I have so what do you call it, Deadlands. So I feel like I got my bases covered in terms of what do you call it, in terms of the games, though. My buddy Jason Hobbs of Hobbs and Friends, his terrific OSR based podcast, he contributed to that. So I feel like maybe there's some obligation to actually order that damn thing. But yeah, for me, I've got Down Darker Trails, and I saw last week that Chaosium actually, this is for those unfamiliar, playing Call of Cthulhu in the Old West, and they just announced a mega campaign for this that's going to be coming out later this year too. So I think I got my Old West kick covered. What else here? Yes, and Nefarious One Ring second edition was announced this week too. So, and I think that's normally, like when I get to a point with a game, and then suddenly if I've got a complete set or just completed one, and now they announce a new one, it usually pisses me off. But from what I understand, it's going to be minor changes to the system, and then kind of including stuff that was expanded in some source books, in particular in the Player's Companion that came out a couple of years ago. Yeah, it looks like an exciting time to jump into the what do you call it? So the One Ring role-playing game. I'm in the process of writing an email. Oh, terrific. Someone's writing me about Mage as well. That's great. And Sean just joined us. Hey, Sean. Uh-oh. And the spine's been coming out on RuneQuest Glorantha. That ain't good. Oh boy. Okay, well, I will have to bear that in mind too. It seems like I need to be being mindful of these spines on some of these role-playing games. I can tell you, you know what game never comes apart at the spine? Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea. Because Jeff made a point of getting this crazy double stitch stuff in it. So I saw someone commenting in chat recently about the price of the game, and it is like it's not cheap. You know, for the core rulebook, there is a player's manual that's out now where you can get just the first couple of the section that's just on players. But the this is one of the best individual role playing books I've ever owned. I make use of this to be honest, it's kind of pathetic, but pretty much every day. Because I'm looking something up, or I'm getting referencing it for something else I'm working on, or I'm working on my Tula campaign, and it's solid stitching on it. It's got these great bookmarks in there that every modern game seems to have, and it's got a lovely kind of matte finish on it as well too. I've got the deluxe edition with the foil cover as well, but I actually like the regular edition better, just because I like the finish on it better. So anyway, so there's some positive news about spines in role-playing game. But anyway, boy, so that's a pretty big update, and probably longer than what I intended. Looking at the time, there's no way I'm getting to my Starfinder review tonight, but I hope this has been a helpful kind of update for where things stand with the channel and the games that we'll be streaming on this. Why I've given up on those, or not going to be running any longer those other two games. And given some ideas for neat games that we hope to get to the table in the future. Oh, and I'll say one more thing too about Marvel superheroes as well. So obviously this is this game's out of print. This game's been out of print for about 20 years, give or take. But you can find there are two different sites where you can download PDF versions of these. And I only mention this because normally, I would not want to. I want creators to get paid for stuff, but the thing is that neither TSR nor Marvel, both of which have been notoriously litigious, or WotC at least, and Marvel / Disney, those have been up for years and years and years. So if you're curious about this particular game, a little creative searching for Marvel superheroes would probably track down these PDFs, which you can just snag and read for yourself, because they're a lot of fun. They're very easy to get through. And if you're interested in following along at home when we run it with your own version of the universal table, you will be easily able to do so with that. So anyway, if for no other reason, downloading the player's book and then spending half an hour rolling up a bonkers character is tons and tons of fun. So anyway, so until next time, I think that's all the things I needed to cover. So the next big event that I've got coming up for the channel is obviously our gaming marathon. So on June 1st, we will be streaming all day. Last couple of sessions, we break it up into different smaller chunks, but we will be playing a surprise role-playing game with a bunch of my buddies from back in my hometown. We're all going to be playing in the same room, which will be exciting. And the players don't know what we're playing, so I'm pretty excited about that. I'm looking forward to springing that on them. I think it's going to be a great session for them, and I think it's going to make for a really fun stream as well. So that's the next big thing I've got in mind, and I'm kind of turning my most of my efforts towards getting ready for that right now. But once that's over, then we'll be getting back into some more regular rotation of some of the other games on the channel, and get some more regular groups as well too. I know things have been a little scattershot, in particular on our Wednesday sessions, but that'll be settling down once this vacation is over. I also want to say thank you to the people who've been suggesting games along the way too. It's really helpful. Yeah, I need to be engaged and want to run a game for me to actually get it to the table. But I do appreciate hearing what games people are enjoying more than others, or other games they might want to see it on the channel as well. The comment on GURPS that I got recently, while I don't think it was right for what the suggestion was for, it has definitely brought me back to one of my old loves. So thanks very much for that, and for everyone who's given suggestions for what games they might want to see on the channel as well. I'll also mention too that I've said this before, but for games where we don't have a set roster for players too, if you're interested in playing in one of my games, shoot me an email. So long as we've got space in the game, I'm happy to have you join us. If you are a regular viewer of the channel and you like the players that we play with and you like the games that we run, well, then you're probably going to be a good fit for our games. The only thing is with certain games, again, like we have sort of fixed rosters with some of them. So it's more likely going to be one of the open table OSR games like Ash or something like that. That doesn't mean you need to necessarily own the game to join one of the campaigns. It just means that you need to be it obviously is helpful to do that, but yeah, I mean, I think that sometimes it's not apparent that I've made some terrific new friends in the course of doing this that have all come from people who have been watching the channel. So that's great, and I'm always happy to make new friends who love gaming. So anyway, let's see here. That's, I think, it. So for those listening at home and those who have joined us in chat as well, thanks so much for joining me, and for everyone in chat too. That's been really great. I need to do more live streams like this on a more regular basis because it's always fun to see people chatting with each other in chat. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns regarding any of the games that I've talked about here, please don't hesitate to leave a comment in the comment section below. You can shoot me an email at dungeonmusings@gmail.com, or you can reach me on Twitter at Dungeon Musings. I also will mention that we've got a link in the description of the video to the charity fundraising campaign that we run on the channel. This is something called Heroes Save Villages. And from now until July 1st, so about 6 weeks from now, you can, for every $25 that are donated to the campaign, and it doesn't go to me, it goes all to SOS Children's Villages International to help support the children that benefit from their programs. Every $25 enters you once into our raffle, and the raffle has a bunch of very, very cool stuff in it. So the grand prize is a Platinum Edition Waterdeep Dragon Heist box set that is produced by Beetle and Grimm. If you've been snooping on the D&D Live stream and seen their pretty kick-ass deluxe edition that's going to be coming out for Descent into Avernus, this is the first one of those they did. They did it for the Dragon Heist Adventure. It is a $500 US product. It is not available any longer. It is a limited edition release. You could win that as the grand prize in the raffle. But if you don't win that, we still have a bunch of other really awesome prizes, including a core rulebook for the RuneQuest Glorantha RPG that just came out, the one that I just mentioned before. Core rulebook for the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition, which was generously donated by Cubicle 7. A core rulebook for the Fantasy Flight Legend of the Five Rings game. Both core rulebooks for Delta Green, published by Arc Dream Publishing. Let's see here, what else is in there? There's a bunch of assorted handbooks or source books that are in there. Modifius has contributed complete PDF libraries for both Conan 2D20 and the Star Trek Adventures 2D20. Let's see here. Pelgrane Press has donated PDF copies of Night's Black Agents, their super cool Super Spy meets Vampire role-playing game, and the brand new Mutant City Blues 2nd edition game. Paizo has contributed a copy of the starter set for Starfinder, which is an amazing starting product too. Boy, if I had been less long-winded, I could talk about that tonight, but I'm not going to tonight because I'm too damn tired. We've recently heard that from Matt Lillard of Beetle and Grimm, and they've offered to donate a copy of the Sinister edition, their deluxe edition of the Ghosts of Saltmarsh to the campaign. So someone could win that as well. Again, any money that is donated goes directly to help the people at SOS Children's Villages International support the more than 80,000 children around the world that they help provide a nurturing and stable and caring environment for them so they can actually enjoy a childhood. So on top of assisting a very worthy cause, you're also getting a chance to win some very, very cool gaming stuff. So anyway, that's kind of it. Oh, the last thing I always forget to mention too, if you enjoyed this, I mean, it's probably already a subscriber, but if you are new to this, if this is the first time you've joined us on the channel, please feel free to hit the subscribe button. And if you want to know when we're going to be playing and streaming games live, hit the bell icon so you can know that we're actually going live and streaming, and you can join us in the chat and join us at the table. So anyway, that is that. Thanks so much, everybody who is watching this later. Thanks, everyone in chat who has joined me and followed along on this Sunday evening of the long weekend. I hope the long weekend's been terrific for everybody. I'll see you again soon. And until then, happy gaming.